offered it there. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our interview here with Kevin Jones, the CISO from Airbus, but also Chief Digital Group Officer in one person. That is, I think, a very good idea when we talk about information and cybersecurity. He will be speaking here in our series for the Munich Cybersecurity Conference edition 2022. We conduct a number of expert interviews as part of the program, and Kevin was kind enough to make time in his agenda, in his very busy agenda, I must say, to talk to us today and to offer his perspectives at this conference, which is called Drifting Clouds: Leadership Perspectives on Addressing Evolving Cyber Threats. At the beginning, a few words about Kevin. He is, of course, responsible for everything related to information security in a technology group like Airbus, but this is really a wide range of functions, starting from risk management, design architecture, detection and response, but also, and that I think we will talk about later as well, cybersecurity research and innovation across all the divisions of the group. And this includes, of course, information technology security, industrial control system technology, and never last but never least, the security of people and the products themselves, the product security domains. He, of course, is, he studied computer science and has his PhD also already in the field. So he's been faithful since studying and working on his PhD in information and cybersecurity. He is also a founding member of Cyber Wales because he's originally from Wales, and I understand, Kevin, that you are now sitting actually in Wales. Thank you for connecting. And what I also like, he is an advocate and champion for cybersecurity in academia, especially for the development of cyber skills and for multidisciplinary research. So if you Google him, you will find many articles. He is very engaged in of course, in the security research community, and has published over 50 articles and holds multiple patents. Well, I think I tried to condense it in a couple of sentences. We could talk the whole interview time about all your achievements and activities. Must be a busy man. Thank you for joining, Kevin. It's an honor and a privilege to have you today.
That's quite an introduction. So thank you very much. An absolute pleasure to be with you all today as well.
Let's start. We have this leadership perspectives on addressing evolving cyber threats. What keeps you up at night, if there's something that keeps you up at night at all?
So I think it's an in-joke within CISOs that you're always forever awake at night, and you're always one phone call away from all the fires that are everywhere else. I have to say, for me, I look at it in completely the opposite way. Being a CISO in the industry that I love and I'm passionate about, especially for a company like Airbus, where there's always something new and exciting and the breadth of what we do, I really love that challenge. And certainly looking at how we deploy new technologies, our entire landscape changes, the threat landscape, the technology landscape, changes every 6 months. And that's always new and innovative for me. So I always actually go to bed pretty happy, especially on the days when there hasn't been a cyber crisis, with where we are as an industry, where we are with Airbus. And I absolutely love that challenge, that intellectual challenge as well that we face as an industry.
Very good. So if you would look a little bit what's happening now at the threat landscape, as we call it, are there any developments that you're expecting, and how would you answer to those developments in your strategy? Is there something that you want to highlight or you point out?
Yeah, so the strategy for cybersecurity at Airbus is an interesting one, actually. Like most companies, we obviously have compliance and regulation based, but we're also risk based. And that gives you a little bit more flexibility. It's not quite so black and white, depending on where you are in our business. So we also have four very distinct pillars, as you said in your introduction. Obviously IT, but industrial, product, and people domains have to form part of that strategy. We have a federated model, which I think is a little bit unique. Most people will have their cybersecurity embedded in IT and see it as an IT problem. Now, obviously for us, we have a huge amount of expert skills within our IT domain to be able to provide security architecture, for example, run our tools and capabilities that we'd have there. But equally, we then have the same level of capability within our product, in our engineering domains, whether they're designing the security architecture of an aeroplane or a satellite or a helicopter, for example. But it's federated. So the end, we have corporate capabilities that allow for that localized accountability, but a very centralized coordination and strategy around what we do. And that makes it very, very agile to be able to respond to that threat landscape as it evolves. Because, for example, some of the corporate capabilities, such as the CERT, when there is an incident or something that needs to be investigated that has been escalated from our security operations centers, we can do that wherever it may sit in the business or whichever domain it may sit in. The same in terms of things like vulnerability management, which we can talk about later on. Very hot topic for organizations right now, especially given the prevalence of vulnerabilities during last year and Log4Shell or Log4j just before Christmas. And that vulnerability management capability for us is centralized in the way that we coordinate it, because it makes us very quick, very agile to be able to respond to those kind of emerging incidents and vulnerabilities that occur. So in a nutshell, if you like, our strategy for Airbus is to manage at a risk acceptance level for the company, and that's risk acceptance levels, it's plural, because different parts of the business will have different levels, to have leading capabilities, and we've really invested with our cybersecurity transformation in those capability development, and that means skills, it means tools and technologies as well. And then bringing all that together in a really coordinated way, I think is the only way for certainly large enterprises like ours to be able to operate, because that means that we can be very much on the defensive side and we have the right level of defense technologies. We then have the monitoring side, and finally our ability to react in the event of something that occurs.
Well, that sounds extremely complex, I must say. I mean, at one, of course, the good, what I like about it is that everything is integrated and connected. So you don't isolate those different tasks, which I think is part of the success. And I like the term risk acceptance levels. So that maybe is also a very clever way of directing your strategy or defining your strategy and the measures behind. We always come across the how do you actually sort of determine those risks? If you have what is the risk acceptable, because people always have a little bit problems with determining what risk really would there be. So is there anything that you can recommend that or how do you do this?
So how long have you got?
Yeah, here we go. Now you start and I'll say stop.
So firstly, you've picked up on the wonderful point. We often in the industry talk about risk tolerance, and if you take that from the perspective, it's quite negative. It's I've got to be absolutely perfect everywhere, and that's not how businesses work. Businesses take risks, and cybersecurity cannot fix all of our risks. So to open up that discussion with a business, you have to start with this discussion around risk acceptance. And I have a very technical background, and I'm one of those people who, if you give me a system or an environment, I will always find a way, given enough time, that I can find a new vulnerability, I can break it, I can do this, I can do that. Risk tolerance would say, do you know what, I've got this one wonderful attack that means that if I daisy chain these 3 vulnerabilities and do this, I can own and pawn that system. The reality is that's probably something that's not really bothering a business. It's too difficult to execute, and that would be within our risk acceptance. So changing that language actually has been a very good start for our entire cybersecurity teams to start thinking differently and change their mindset. The second thing I think about risk that makes it so difficult is quantifying that risk, because you often say in cybersecurity, well, this technology or this tool or maybe this vulnerability leads us to have that risk. But the landscape then changes very quickly, and within a few months, your entire risk landscape is out of date. So the way I'm trying to do it in Airbus is to say, okay, we have our risk dashboards, risk frameworks. They're aggregated. It's part of our federated model, which really helps as well, because it means we can really look into the detail of risk. And we say, okay, we obviously then have a risk reduction plan to get us down to that risk acceptance level. And we're going to invest in maybe new technologies or maybe new processes, or we're going to enhance the capabilities in certain parts of the group to be able to do that. The problem is, and one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, especially in the industry when it's about risk, is we then say, right, we're going to aggregate that to a single risk dashboard with low, medium, and high. The problem you've got in an organization is actually, if I then start aggregating risks, well, it's always high. So you spent all this money, you come back to me 6 months later and it's still high. And you have to explain then, well, yes, but, and maybe. So what we do actually is say, okay, this is where we are in our risk dashboard based on the baseline of risk that we took, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, or a year ago, 3 years ago. But here's what's changed since. So the company's maybe done a new digital transformation. We've got new platforms. The threat landscape externally, so things we cannot control, have all changed. And this is where this is driving risks up. So I've often now shown this as almost a scales. We say, well, this is where we're getting better. This is what's changed. Some things that are completely non-controllable to us. And that enables us to have a very sensible conversation about managing risk. And the final piece of advice I would say is we often look for averages. And averages can absolutely sink and kill a cybersecurity program. Because if you're starting to say, well, everybody has to hit this average baseline, that means inside that average, some things are very good, some things are very bad. You completely lose visibility of what's really important, and you lose that ability to deep dive into some of the data. So what we've done in Airbus is, I'll be very kind of short on this, but in the enterprise risk management side, we present obviously the top risks to the company in the context of business and business risk for cybersecurity. Then we have a dedicated team, which is cybersecurity risk management, where we pull together all of the data about our controls, our operations. It actually sits right next to our vulnerability management team. So that enables us to have sensible conversations at CISO level for how I manage the cybersecurity strategy, the program, and the risks. And then we translate that into business risk to be presented to the executive level and executive committee. So those are some of the tips and tricks that I think that we've developed probably over the last 2.5 years of our own transformation journey, and some of our great lessons that I think we've been learned. The next question I know you're going to ask me is it working? Well, it is. I'm still looking for industry best practice, and I'm still very much open to ideas from other places. But certainly those are some of the things I've found to work very well for our company.
Very good. You mentioned it in the beginning. Vulnerability management is maybe a point we should look at. Of course, one thing is your own organization and your own, domains of control. But then you have, of course, a whole ecosystem of providers, suppliers, and partners. And I think they also, contribute to the vulnerability picture. How do you deal with that kind of vulnerability situation?
I think vulnerability management, for obvious reasons, is an absolutely hot topic for our industry and for us as a company right now. So in terms of how we manage that, firstly, inside our own organization, we actually have vulnerability feeds that actually come from the normal suppliers and third parties that we have, those standard industry feeds with CVSS scores and various things like that. What we then do actually is a little bit different, is we translate that into a business impact assessment or a business impact value, because a high vulnerability, if actually you're not using it or it's within an enclave of the business that's highly well protected, might not be a priority one critical patch. It might be a high patch, so you buy yourself some more time. So we definitely go through that process. And then you have to be able to patch things very, very quickly across all of your systems, which means you need good asset databases and good asset inventories. So that's why, again, we try and bring all of those things together to make that vulnerability piece work. The supply chain part, I think, is the final bit, which is exceptionally difficult to do. And it only works through good engagement with your suppliers. They've got to be able to inform you when they have an incident, for example, and we have information sharing partnerships with our suppliers. We share through threat intelligence, the IOCs or the TTPs throughout our business, and we generally pull hashes or IP addresses into those very quickly. And all of that as an ecosystem really enables you to respond quickly. The problem is it's not cheap to do it. It's a lot of effort. And I think for organizations like ours that are doing it right now, we're doing it reasonably well, but I'd definitely like to make that whole process more efficient.
Is there a way to incentivize providers to, follow the philosophy of, the customer, in that case, your group, to live really, not only to provide the certification or, but to really sort of be motivated to really engage in those ideas and principles?
Yeah, so for us with suppliers, we manage it through, obviously through procurement. So when you're first onboarded as a supplier, there's the usual standard cybersecurity contracts. We have audits, but actually the regular engagements that we have, maybe for some of our larger suppliers who have certs, we do cert to cert engagements with them. We do a lot of information sharing, as I said, because that enables all of us to be more secure, and it builds that trust relationship that we have very much with the supply chain. And obviously, if there is an incident in one of the suppliers, it enables us to be very quick to respond, depending on how we use that supplier, where they are in the infrastructure. And it's that real open communication and sharing that is the only way it'll help us to be more secure.
Very good. One question, especially now, of course, in your industry, but I think it could be also a trigger for other industries. And actually, it says also in your short biography, the connection of cybersecurity, but also the safety of critical systems. So I think maybe you could explain a little bit on how these are connected and how do you actually maybe consciously put these two concepts together.
Yeah, so there's an open debate in the industry about security versus safety and whether one is a subset of the other. I think from the perspective, if we look at things like industrial control systems, for example, one of the challenges there is how to encapsulate security around those environments, especially as you integrate digital transformation into a production facility. And having good security there enables you to reduce the number of incidents that are likely to occur within that environment. And that for me is always slightly different to the safety question, because you can still build safety critical systems that are resilient to any kind of incident within that environment, whether it's duplicating through triple redundancy, for example, in the systems, whether you then have, if again I take the industrial environment, you not only have the control devices, the PLCs, the RTUs, but you'll have the safety controller environments as well behind that. And there is cases where those safety controllers in industrial environments have been targeted too. But actually the idea then about having the control mechanisms or the outlet mechanisms, they're still engineered systems, and you can still engineer safety into those industrial environments. So it's a mixed question, and the answer is you basically need both. You need to be resilient for cyber, which is obviously part of the equation. And then on top of that, you've got to ensure you have safety by design as well as security by design.
Well, since this is a forum also including, experts and perspectives from government and policy making or public agencies, is there anything from your point of view that you wish should be addressed more keenly and to help your daily operational work to be more successful? Is there something that you wish governments or the responsible agencies should very much improve or continue or focus on this and that?
There's a few things, I think, that are very much on the radar at the moment. I'm a huge advocate right now for human-centric cybersecurity. So considering, for example, not just the technical element of our industry. And we say humans are the weakest link. It's a myth. It's completely wrong. And we've got to start including, I mean, Airbus is fantastic that we've got psychologists that work in our cyber research teams.
That's very
that
good.
Look about how people make decisions. They look about why people will make mistakes and how we learn from those near misses and incidents that occurred. But more importantly, how we design systems around users. And I don't just mean end users, I mean us as cybersecurity users. If you've got firewalls that are too complex to configure, if you're working now with 20 different security tools and expect them all to be configured absolutely perfectly, otherwise you get owned. You need to think about systems design and go back to some of those fundamentals. The first thing I would say is, please consider cybersecurity as multidisciplinary. It's not just technical, even if it's quite predominantly technical, and certainly human-centric sits at the heart of that. The second thing I would say is cybersecurity is still maturing as a profession. So we need to be able to talk amongst ourselves on a similar plane about how we are as an industry. What is a junior pen tester, and a senior pen tester? Well, how do we standardize that? Because depending on where you talk about, could be very different. And how we all behave in terms of when an incident occurs, or if something happens, you get 10 different ideas about how to solve it. And that's confusing for people who are in the industry and even experts. I have absolutely no idea how businesses would feel if they get approached by 5 different security professionals with 10 different ideas. So that idea of us being a profession, being slightly more mature, would definitely be the second thing governments need to do. And the UK government actually is already working on something very similar to that by establishing a set of norms and a way of working with industry skills frameworks to try and address that. So other governments definitely should look at what the UK government's doing with the UK National Cybersecurity Centre. The obvious one, I think, for the third thing will come up is obviously talking then about certifications. And that's a double-edged sword. I know a lot of companies, especially for critical systems and critical environments, are being asked to certify their cybersecurity products. But equally, I go back to our world changes every 6 months. So can that certification actually lead to better technologies? I'm not coming down either way on that argument, but what I will say is we need to do more on software development, especially critical software development. And whether it's certified or not, for me, is still a question mark. But what cannot be allowed to continue to happen is a vulnerability that's found in a piece of software sort of over here has a huge raging, absolutely massive scale consequence for thousands of businesses if they don't patch within 24 hours. That is a completely wrong and illogical model, and it's not sustainable for us as an industry. I don't have the answer to that, but I would definitely encourage research groups, governments who are launching research groups, to look at that almost inequity between what is a software development issue and then turns out to be, well, it has to be fixed over here by all the companies. And I think for me, that's something that has to be looked at. And that links back to vulnerability. Vulnerability standards come as part of that as well. So there's probably quite a lot in there for governments to look at, but that's certainly where I would put my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kevin Jones, the Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Digital Officer from Airbus Group. Thank you for your time. Thank you for that short insight. I think we had some very valuable insights from such a complex and global company like Airbus. I thank you so much for your time to speak here at the Munich Cybersecurity Conference 2022 at the Talking Heads series and offering your perspectives on information and cybersecurity. Thank you so much, Kevin. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'll see you for the next edition, then hopefully again in person. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon.
Have a wonderful conference.